I remember the exact morning it all began, though back then I didn't know it was the start of anything. Just another Tuesday, I guess. I was in my kitchen, the smell of brewing coffee filling the small space. Habit, I suppose, trying to hold on to some kind of normal, some routine, even when the world outside already felt off. I work in pest control, you see, Dr. Ethan Kincaid. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? A PhD in entomology, running a small-time extermination business in the suburbs. Some folks called me quirky, others just plain weird. I just loved insects, knew more about them than most people cared to. They were, to me then, little miracles of evolution. That morning, as the coffee dripped, I heard the crickets from the backyard, a sound as staple to a humid summer in upstate New York as anything. But this time, it wasn't quite right. The chirping had a lower register, a rumble almost, and it stretched out longer than it should have, like someone holding their breath for too long. Each chirp ended in a silence, too long, too deep for any summer night I'd ever experienced. My brow furrowed. I just thought, must be working too much lately. My head was buzzing from the calls yesterday, the endless questions about weird infestations. I glanced at the local paper on the counter. A small article, tucked away near the classifieds, mentioned something about new experimental herbicides being tested in a neighboring district. I remember thinking, that's odd. I don't remember reading about this trial anywhere. A faint smile I hadn't even realized I was wearing faded. Just a strange detail, nothing more. Or so I told myself. Later that afternoon, I was at Mrs. Jones's prize-winning rose garden. Elder Mrs. Jones, bless her heart, had called in a panic about her prized Japanese beetles. Normally, these guys were a nuisance, but harmless, predictable. But what I found, it wasn't normal. They were bigger, first off, about 1.5 times their usual size perhaps. Maybe not monstrous, but noticeable. And their shells, they had this metallic sheen to them under the sun, a kind of dark gloss that didn't look natural. It caught the light in a way that made my skin crawl. Maybe a new species, I tried to rationalize. A mutation, some kind of environmental factor increasing their size. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. But then, they didn't scatter. Not when I approached, not when my shadow fell over them. Dozens of those dark, glassy eyes turned on me, all at once. They just stared. No fear, no instinct to flee. My heart felt a little too fast, a frantic thud against my ribs. I reached out, slowly, to pick one up. Its shell felt hard, cold, colder than any insect I've ever touched. I pulled my hand back, a shiver running down my arm. My fingers felt like they'd grazed ice. Just a new breed, I guess, I muttered to myself, the words feeling thin, hollow. Yeah, that's it, new breed. When I got back to my pest control truck, the usual scent of chemicals, formaldehyde really, was different. Something was mixed in, a heavy, damp earth smell. Like thousands of things had just crawled through, leaving a residue of soil and something else, something organic and slightly musky. There were no insects inside, though. My truck was meticulously clean. I just shook my head, my thoughts a jumble. Too much direct sunlight to the brain, I said out loud. The call came in after 5, an emergency, a suburban power substation. Something was interfering with the main grid, causing intermittent blackouts across several blocks. The technicians who went in first had just run. They sounded hysterical on the phone. I drove out there, the late afternoon sun already dipping, casting long, unsettling shadows. The air felt heavy, buzzing with an almost electric tension. When I pulled up, the main gate was open, a hazard sign lying crooked in the dirt. No one was around, just a high-pitched whine that definitely wasn't from the power lines. I pushed through the door to the primary control room. What I saw, I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes.
thousands, maybe tens of thousands of fire ants. Not the usual tiny specks. These were huge, the size of mice, crawling over the control panels, chewing through wires, their mandibles snapping. They moved with an unnerving precision, a terrifying order, like soldiers executing a plan. Then I saw one. It was massive, the size of a small dog, maybe a terrier.
It stood on top of a sparking junction box, its antenna twitching, slowly, deliberately, like it was processing information. It turned its head, if you could call it that, and those many-faceted eyes locked onto mine. And it launched. It moved impossibly fast, a dark blur of carapace and legs. I yelled, a guttural sound I didn't recognize as my own. Pure instinct, I brought up my sprayer, aimed, and let loose a blast of industrial-strength chemical. This stuff usually dropped anything on contact. But it didn't. The ant just staggered, then seemed to glow. Its shell became slicker, a deeper, more iridescent black. And it came at me faster. The other ants around it, hundreds of them, started moving with renewed ferocity, their clicking mandibles becoming a louder chorus. My spray wasn't killing them. It was making them angrier, stronger. "No, no way!" I shouted, backing up, stumbling. My hands, the ones that had held so much knowledge, were shaking. My tools, they were useless. They were worse than useless. Then the sound came. That low thrumming I'd heard from my backyard, but amplified 1,000-fold. It vibrated in my chest, synced with the frantic thump, thump, thump of my heart. It wasn't just physical anymore. It was in my head. And amidst that horrifying white noise of clicks and gnaws and the ceaseless beat of unseen wings, a voice. It was deep, resonating, almost like the air itself was speaking. One word. My name. Kincaid. I ran. I just ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my truck, fumbling with the keys, driving away from that substation, away from the hum, away from the voice. My breath hitched in my throat, a dry gasp. Back home, I slammed the front door shut, my hands still shaking violently. I tried to calm myself, to breathe. It had to be a hallucination, sleep deprivation, too much coffee. I just needed to see something normal. I flicked on the TV. Local news, already. The screen flickered, showing grainy, distorted images. The anchorwoman, her face too pale, tried to maintain a calm demeanor, but her voice cracked on every other word. They were talking about incidents, not just the substation. A baseball field, my town's local park, apparently had been swallowed by a swarm of colossal locusts in minutes. Gone. Another report showed a beach, miles of coastline, absolutely swarming with giant cockroaches, digging deep, intricate tunnels under the sand, turning the shore into a maze. The TV screen, it was weird. It kept pixelating, the images blurring. And in the background, behind the anchorwoman, I saw it. A long crack. Not a straight line, but winding, curving up the wall behind her, like a gnarled tree root. It snaked upward, growing even as I watched. Or maybe I just became aware of it. It made my stomach clench. I snapped the TV off. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. I went to my small home office, my eyes darting around the familiar piles of books, the shelves filled with preserved specimens. I started pulling them out, frantically flipping pages, looking for anything, something, an explanation. But even as I searched, I knew it wouldn't be in those pages, not anymore. I tried calling people, my colleagues from the university, some old entomology professors, the regional authorities, anyone.
My voice was hoarse, desperate. Each call was met with skepticism, sometimes outright dismissal. "Ethan, slow down, man. What are you talking about? Giant ants? Are you off your meds?" One even chuckled, which made my blood run cold. They were busy, they said. Unusual weather patterns, localized power surges, a mass delusion perhaps. They either didn't believe me, or they were too busy putting out other natural fires. I was alone. Completely. I walked to the window of my office, the one facing the street. The city lights were just starting to come on, but the usual brilliant reds and oranges of a suburban sunset were gone. Instead, a deep, unsettling greenish-yellow hue was bleeding into the sky. It wasn't fog. It was too rich, too dense, like a living gas, seeping into every crack, every tree, every roof. It wasn't natural. I knew it wasn't. And from way, way off in the distance, I heard it again. Not a car horn, not human sounds. This time, it was more. A collective beating of wings, a scraping, a gnawing, and that same super low hum, but layered. It was a melody now, intricate, terrifying.
Like billions of creatures singing, I don't know, a victory song. I took a step back, my legs rubbery. I tripped over something, one of my old specimen boxes. It clattered to the floor, scattering dried moths and pinned butterflies. Amidst the brittle, dusty remains, something else caught my eye. It was a piece of shell, hard, dark, with strange symmetrical patterns I'd never seen in any textbook. I picked it up. It still had a faint warmth to it, a strange cold heat. Under a thin layer of dust, there was a small etching, a spiral symbol, repeating, ancient somehow. And then I knew. I remembered it. The exact same symbol I had glimpsed on the shell of that giant fire ant at the substation, just as it lunged. The same twisting, root-like pattern I'd seen on the TV screen. This wasn't a mutation. This wasn't a random disaster. This was intentional, a conscious, horrible design. I backed away, pressing myself against the wall, my eyes wide, fixed on the small, dark piece of shell in my trembling hand. I wasn't looking at the world as a scientist anymore. I was seeing the beginning of something else, something utterly, monstrously new. We'd been in the supermarket for, I don't know, days, weeks. Time kind of melted, thick and syrupy, hard to keep track of. Outside, the world was just noise, a constant low thrum, like a million engines running just beneath the earth, layered with the whirring of countless wings, the clicking, the gnawing. It was a white noise that got into your head, made your teeth ache, your very bones vibrate. Sometimes, I swear, there were frequencies that weren't quite sound, but pressure, heavy and suffocating, making my stomach churn, my thoughts snag. It made you question everything you thought you heard, everything you thought you felt. There was only one fluorescent light working above the canned goods aisle, flickering. It hummed its own frantic little tune, throwing long greenish shadows that made all the familiar shelves, the abandoned carts, look sharp and somehow sinister. We were just huddled near it, 3 of us left. Sarah, a former librarian, pale and drawn, constantly picking at her cuticles, and Mark, a young tech guy who'd been trying to set up some sort of radio signal, giving up a few days ago, just staring at the wall now. And me, Dr. Ethan Kincaid, the man who was supposed to know bugs, who now knew nothing. The air in here was off, not stale, not quite. It had a heavy, damp earth smell mixed with something else, something sweet and mushroomy, like a forest floor after a week of rain, but 100 times stronger. It was cloying. It settled in your lungs. Last night, after the sun had gone down, or what we assumed was down,
because the sky was often just a swirling greenish-yellow haze, the sounds from outside actually seemed to lessen, not disappear, never disappear, but they softened into a dull roar, pushing in on us from every wall. And then I heard it, a different sound, from the second floor, the old office space, scraping, like heavy gravel being dragged across concrete, slowly, deliberately. I froze, my breath catching. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Sarah just shook her head, not even looking up from her fingers. Mark didn't react at all. I listened again. Nothing for a moment. Just the hum of the light and the distant, omnipresent thrum from outside. Then, scrape, drag, scrape. It was too slow for a rat, too heavy. It moved with a kind of deliberate intent. "Must be the wind," I muttered to myself, my voice thin. Yeah, just the wind, shifting some debris up there. But there was no wind inside. The building was sealed. Or a big rat, I added, trying to find some conviction. But the words felt like dust in my mouth. I looked up at the ceiling above us. It was a concrete slab, meant to be solid. But there, near the fluorescent light, a new crack had appeared. Small. But it wasn't a straight line. Not a fault from shifting foundations. It snaked. It curved, like a small gnarled tree root pushing its way through the plaster. It was dark, a deep, unsettling brownish green. My gut twisted. I didn't say anything further. I just watched it for a long, long time. It seemed to pulse. No, my eyes were just tired. The next morning, the water stopped, completely. Our makeshift filter system in the back, gravity-fed from a single barely dripping pipe, just sputtered and died. We needed water. We always needed water. "Damn it," I mumbled, grabbing my toolbox. I walked to the utility room, a cold, cramped space behind the old frozen food section. The silence here, away from the flickering light, was heavier, filled only with the faint, sickening white noise from outside. I found the main pipe leading into the building, hoping it was just a blockage I could clear. I reached out, my fingers tracing the cold metal. But it wasn't cold. It was warm. Oddly, impossibly warm, like a faint fever. A shiver ran down my arm, prickly and unpleasant. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath, trying to hear anything over the thrumming in my own head. And I did. A sound, faint at first, then growing clearer, like putting a seashell to your ear. But instead of the ocean, it was a chewing, a constant, delicate, yet utterly horrifying chomp, chomp, chomp inside the pipe. Like millions of tiny jaws grinding something down, slowly, relentlessly. My stomach clenched. Then, from a smaller, fractured pipe underneath, something trickled out. Not clear, not even murky water. It was a yellowish-green liquid, thick and viscous, coated with a slimy sheen. It smelled moldy and sickeningly sweet, like something rotting but also blooming at the same time. The smell hit me hard, raising the hair on my arms, making me gag. "What the hell is this?" I heard myself whisper, my voice raw, breaking. What are they doing with the water?" As if in answer, a dark, thick root, just like the crack on the ceiling, but much, much larger, suddenly burst through the concrete ceiling directly above the pipe. It was massive, gnarled, covered in that same brownish-green hue, almost black in the dim light. It writhed for a split second, then simply hung there, dripping that same yellowish-green liquid onto the floor, making a small, sickening puddle. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic thing. The sound of chewing from the pipe seemed to intensify, mocking me. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't even touch it. Later that afternoon, Mark came back. He'd gone out early, promising to be careful, to scavenge for tools, for anything useful. Hope, a stupid, fragile thing, had flickered in Sarah's eyes, even in mine. Now he was back. He walked in, stumbling over a discarded pallet, and flashed a smile. "Got some stuff," he said, holding up a canvas bag. His voice was not quite right, a little too light, a little too eager. And his smile, it was too wide. It stretched his lips, showing too much gum, too many teeth. It didn't look like his smile. It looked like someone wearing a smile that didn't quite fit. "Mark, any luck?" I asked, trying to sound normal, but a cold knot was forming in my stomach. He blinked, and that was when I saw it. His eyelids closed, and then opened with a delay, a full half-second, like a faulty video feed, a lagging reflection. His eyes, when they finally opened, seemed a shade too dark, too still. "Just, a few things," he chirped, that wide, unsettling smile still plastered on his face. He held out the bag to me. I reached for it, hesitant. Our fingers brushed. His hand. It was warm, unnaturally warm, a feverish, dry heat that felt alien against my skin. And where he touched me, a small red welt immediately bloomed on the back of my hand. I stared at it. It wasn't fading. It was throbbing. And inside, under my skin, I swear to God, I felt something moving. A tiny, electric shiver, like a nerve twitching, but more deliberate. Mark looked straight into my eyes, his own wide, unblinking, and he smiled again, a grin that went from ear to ear. Monstrous. I snatched my hand back, feeling a cold current shoot up my spine. My mind screamed, "No, no, not him too." "Mark, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a desperate plea. I looked closer. In the corner of his unnaturally wide mouth, something shimmered. A thin, greenish-yellow strand of silk. It wasn't human. His smile stretched further. He didn't blink. "Nothing, Ethan," he said, his voice perfect, too perfect. "I'm just a bit warm, Ethan. Everything's okay." He laughed then, a high-pitched, almost musical giggle that turned my blood to ice. He kept laughing, a sound devoid of joy, of anything human. And then it happened. He started to convulse. His body jerked violently, like an unseen puppet master was yanking his strings. His eyes rolled back into his head, the wide smile still frozen on his face.
He gasped, a wet, choking sound, and his stomach, it swelled, rapidly, impossibly. His shirt buttons popped, straining against the sudden distension. His skin stretched, turning a sickening greenish yellow, the veins underneath throbbing like thick roots. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, finally looking up, her face a mask of primal terror. But it was too late. With a wet, squishing sound, Mark's stomach burst. Not blood, not organs, just a violent explosion of thousands of tiny, glistening, greenish-yellow insects. They swirled out, a living cloud, flitting, buzzing, an unholy, sickening confetti of fragmented life. They didn't scatter, they coalesced, they began to crawl. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, my mind reeling. My breath hitched, caught in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to unsee it, trying to make it a trick of light, a horrifying nightmare. But the buzzing, the frantic scuttling of tiny feet was real. When I opened my eyes, the swarm of insects from Mark's body was already forming a pulsating, shifting mass on the floor, growing, pushing itself into the cracks of the supermarket aisles. Sarah was next to me, not screaming anymore. She was sitting on the floor, staring blankly ahead, talking to herself, muttering, "We don't die, Ethan.
she whispered, her voice calm, utterly devoid of fear, devoid of anything. We just become apart. Her head slowly turned. Her eyes were unfocused, like Mark's, but fixed on nothing in particular. And then the smile, wide, too wide, just like Mark's. She looked at a piece of crumbled concrete from the wall, a little slab that had fallen off. Slowly, almost gracefully, she reached for it. And then, with that same terrifyingly satisfied smile, she began to chew. Grinding the concrete, slowly, deliberately, her jaw working with a horrifying single-minded focus. Swallowing it. Her eyes were still blank, still smiling. I knew what had happened. There was no denying it anymore. The crawling sensation on my hand intensified, a frantic, tiny dance under my skin. I didn't think, I just ran. I pushed past tables, past falling debris, ignoring the sounds of Mark's remains still buzzing and scuttling behind me, ignoring Sarah's sickening chewing. I ran through the abandoned supermarket, which wasn't abandoned anymore. The roots were everywhere now, thicker, darker, snaking down from the ceiling, bursting through the walls, transforming the aisles into a grotesque internal organ. The air was thick with the moldy, sweet scent, a living, breathing mucus. This wasn't a shelter, it was already a nest. I burst out into the greenish-yellow twilight of what used to be a parking lot. The ground was spongy, covered in a slick, dark, organic matter. I looked up. Above the skeletal remains of what were once city buildings, now vast, pulsating, organic towers of earth and chitin mixed with dead things, the sky was permanently shadowed. Great, shifting tapestries of silk, thick and iridescent, hung between these living towers, catching the strange, sickly green light that filtered through the murky atmosphere. And there, in the distance, a colossal form moved. It was a winged insect, bigger than any plane, its exoskeleton reflecting the dim, unnatural light. From its vast, membranous wings, a strange, ethereal, greenish-blue light pulsed, a beacon of otherworldly power. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, a dancer in a macabre sky. The air around me began to thicken, to hum with an unbearable pressure. It felt like my very cells were being vibrated, disassembled, remade. I fell to my knees, gasping, not out of breath, but as if the air itself was trying to push me down. And then the voice. It wasn't the roar, it wasn't the thrumming. It was a single voice, deep, resonating, filling my entire skull, not from outside, but from within. It echoed, not like one voice, but like billions of souls, billions of tiny minds, perfectly blended into one, speaking to me, directly to me. Welcome, Dr. Kincaid. You are ours now. I hit the ground, not from fear, not really, but from a sudden, horrifying clarity, a cold logic that settled into my bones. There was no fight left, no resistance, just understanding. The game was over. We hadn't lost. We had simply been outgrown. I don't know how long I lay there. The thick, organic air, the constant buzz, the knowledge that everything I once knew about life was a lie. Eventually, I just got up. No fight.
No tears. Just a slow, methodical movement. I walked. Where? I didn't know. Just away from the supermarket, away from that place where Mark and Sarah had become something else. I wandered. For how long, I could not say. Eventually, I found myself in one of the places they called preserves, a cavern deep underground, flickering with the faint, yellow light of bare incandescent bulbs. Dirty, haggard faces looked at me, hollow-eyed, gaunt. Survivors.
Not living, really, just existing. Their bodies were emaciated, their spirits long gone. They huddled together, whispering of the outside, of things they'd heard, things they'd seen, things they'd felt, even deep down here. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and desperation. I looked up. Even here, deep beneath the surface, the transformation had begun. From the rough, uneven ceiling of the cave, dark, mysterious, organic roots were slowly descending. They looked like extensions of the immense organic structures outside, pushing their way into our last refuge, always growing, always seeking. I reached out a trembling hand and touched one. It was warm, soft, alive. And then a fleeting image. It flickered in my mind, quick as a thought. A face, a human face, but not one of the haggard, defeated faces I saw around me. It was my face, distorted, a pale greenish hue, and on it a satisfied smile. A wide, terrible, satisfied smile. And my eyes, they were black, glistening, multifaceted, like the eyes of the colossal beetle I'd seen on Mark's neck. What am I becoming? The thought wasn't a question, but a cold whisper of dread, an inevitability. I touched my own lips with my fingertips. They were dry, stiff. They had tightened into a smile, just like